two pieces of cloth were used. First of all, I mentioned before, the sudarin around the face of Jesus and the sindon around his body. So there we have that word sindon. And it's also described later on in the book of John as Athonia. So let's look at those two words, sindon and Athonia. Well, in Mark 15, it says that he, that's Joseph of Arimathea, bought fine linen. Now the Greek word is sindon, and took him down and wrapped him in linen. So let's look at that word sindon. Well, we know what the word sindon means because like the other word, it's used elsewhere in the New Testament. It says at the end of the book of Mark, Mark 14, now a certain young man followed him, having a linen cloth, that's Greek sindon, thrown around his naked body. So it was a large piece of cloth, large enough for Mark. Most people think it's Mark. It actually covered his entire body. So Jesus was actually buried in two separate pieces of cloth, the sudarin around his head and a large piece of linen described separately as a sindon and Athonia around his body. Now we'll look at that word Athonia. It's in John chapter 20. It says, Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb, and he saw linen cloths. And on this occasion, the word used is Athonia there, with a sudarin around his head. Well, we know what that word Athonia is, because like the other words, it's used elsewhere in the New Testament. The word is the derivative of the Greek word athone, which means a linen cloth, and especially a sail. In the same word used in the following scripture, it's in Acts chapter 10. You remember that Peter had a vision and he saw a great sheet coming down from heaven, knit at the four corners. And if you remember, the great sheet had lots of animals in it. Well, the word used is Athonia. So we know that the word used to describe the Shroud of Turin is like a great sheet. So now the sudarium around the head of Jesus, actually now in Spain, is called the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain. And the sindon or Athonia around the body of Jesus is what we now call the Shroud of Turin. Now on the Sunday morning, the women were going to come and do the normal Jewish burial, but that took many hours, involved the application of a lot of ointment and spices. Well, they simply didn't do it because Jesus wasn't there. He'd come back to life again. Now we're going to look at the historical authenticity of the Shroud of Turin. Some people think it's a medieval fraud. Well, that's certainly not what other people think. The Shroud of Turin is a piece of ancient precious linen, 14 foot 3 inches long and 3 foot 7 inches wide, and contains the photo-negative image of a man who has been severely beaten and crucified. Now, this is a textile expert called Mechtilde Fleury-Lemberg, and she says that textiles from Masada in Israel are identical to the Shroud of Turin. She's a world-famous authority on historic textiles. She's the former curator of Switzerland Abegg Foundation Textile Museum, and this is what she says. The shroud has a distinctive, exceptionally fine quality Z-twist, a 3/1 herringbone pattern and a very distinctive joining seam. She says actually the Shroud of Turin is a very precious piece of ancient linen, and the shroud very closely resembles unique ancient textiles found in tombs of the Jewish fortress Masada in Israel. She says that the Shroud of Turin was professionally woven by hand in the Middle East on an ancient Egyptian or Syrian loom. Now, in 1192, was published what's called the Hungarian Prey Codex manuscript. It's been studied an enormous amount, and it does actually display a picture of the Shroud of Turin. It's got the same herringbone weave and the very famous so-called poker burn holes on the shroud. So there we have evidence that the Shroud of Turin was certainly around in 1192. Now, this is important, and you'll see why later on. Mechtilde Fleury-Lemberg specifically discounts what's called the invisible mending theory. There's been a recent theory that some additional material added to the shroud. She says that in her professional opinion, no additional cloth has been added to the shroud at any time. There is a very excellent DVD called The Fabric of Time, in which she and many other experts are interviewed. Now, Dame Isabel Pixek is an internationally acclaimed artist, and she's the winner of the Grand Award for Mural Paintings. Now, she says that in her professional opinion, the Shroud of Turin is not a painting. There's lack of emulsion, lack of light focus, lack of directionality, lack of outline, lack of foreshortening, lack of perspective, and lack of distortion. All very technical stuff. But remember, this is a very professional, a professionally acclaimed, world-acclaimed artist. And she says the Shroud of Turin is not a painting of any description. The Shroud of Turin is actually a mixed photo-negative and photo-positive image. The shroud was first photographed by Secondo Pia in Italy in 1898. Now here we have two images. On the left we have a negative image of Robert Louis Stevenson. On the right, a normal image of Robert Louis Stevenson, what's called photo-positive. So on the left, photo-negative, on the right, photo-positive. Well, the Shroud of Turin is the same. On the left there, we have a photo-negative image, and that's what you're looking at when you look at the Shroud of Turin. When Secondo Pia took a photograph in 1898, his negative was actually a photo-positive of the negative on the left. So his negative was actually a photo-positive, but not completely, because you can see coming from the crown of thorns the blood, but because this was real blood on the shroud, this was now in photo-negative. So there is, on the left, we have a highlighted picture of the face on the shroud with the actual blood on there. That's real blood, type AB, with lots of bilirubin in it, which is what crucified victims had in it because of the torture involved. And on the right, a photo-negative, the one on the left is a photo-negative, and the one on the right is a photo-positive of the negative. But you can see that the blood is now white in colour instead of red on the left, because that is photo-negative. Here we have the whole of on the left-hand side, the actual shroud, as you can see from the front. And on the right, you can actually see the image of Jesus Christ on the right. There's the back of the shroud on the left, and when you take a picture of it, your negative will be a photo-positive showing the back of Jesus with the scourge marks. Now, just by introducing the possibility of a medieval forger, some people think it's Leonardo da Vinci. Now, how could Leonardo da Vinci, or anybody else for that matter, and why would they produce a mixed photo-negative and photo-positive image in the Middle Ages? Now, how could they, and why would they? And why would they today, for example? Now we're going to look at the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain. Now, it's been extensively researched by Dr. Alan Wanger, who's a Professor Emeritus of Duke University, and Mark Guskin, historian and author. And the blood on the Sudarium of Oviedo has the same blood group, type AB, as is found on the Shroud of Turin. Now, this blood group, AB, is found in only 3% of the world's population. So Dr. Alan Wanger employed his polarized image overlay technique to study correlations between the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain. And he found 70 points of correlation on the front and of the Sudarium and 50 on the back. So we can make a conclusion here, a scientific conclusion, that the Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain and the Shroud of Turin were both used to cover the very same identical corpse, because the blood group and the markings are identical. Now, the importance of the Sudarium of Oviedo is its history. Unlike the Shroud, the Sudarium of Oviedo's history is very well known. The Sudarium of Oviedo in Spain accompanied Philip and other Christians fleeing Palestine in 616 AD, and they travelled through Alexandria, Egypt, and into Spain at Cartagena. And the Sudarium of Oviedo is now contained in an oak chest, which was entrusted to Leandro, the Bishop of Seville.